Good morning, trade professionals. We are back with another Simply Trade News Roundup. Hi, Lalo. Hi, Andy. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you guys doing good? That's a question. How come no one's answering? How are you?
It is. Well, I answered very enthusiastically, so it should have been in the tone of my voice, but I guess it wasn't. So good morning. I'm doing well.
Okay.
It's raining here.
Oh, that's weird.
I'm giddy as a filly on a spring morning.
Nice. Anyways, we are going straight into our articles today. Oh, by the way, happy Customs Day. As we're recording, it's Customs Day, and I've seen so many posts about it. So I'm just going to say it. So I guess happy belated Customs Day at that point. I don't know. Whatever. We're jumping straight into the articles. So let's get it started. The first one, kind of talking about the changing landscape of parcel shipping. And there's somewhat of like a discrepancy with FedEx and UPS prices and the services. And I mean, Andy can probably describe this much better because he worked in the industry. But I kind of came up with I didn't come up with it. Well, kind of. There's a scenario. So I'm going to describe it, and I want you to put it together with the article. So it says, John runs an e-commerce business and currently uses multiple carriers to distribute his products. He recently heard about the attractive shipping discounts offered by major carriers like FedEx and UPS. Now he's considering consolidating his carrier selections. Question: what factors should John consider when deciding whether to consolidate his carrier selections? Carrier. Jesus Christ. Carrier selections. How can he strike a balance between cost savings and service reliability? So this goes hand in hand kind of with the article. So if we can tie this into the question or into the article, that would be perfect.
I can tell you through experience here at Global Training Center, you know, Annik, how we ship lots and lots of textbooks here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a great, I don't know why I didn't tie that together.
Just for everybody in the audience, we have our courses. If you're attending as a webinar, we're going to ship you a textbook. And during the pandemic, of course, that was like really hot. Send it to my house. We used to ship, 8, 9, 10 books or whatever to one address at the company because they would distribute the textbooks from there, But the pandemic hit, and then we started shipping to each individual homes. So that was starting to cost us a lot of money. So we started then consolidating. We used to use all shippers. I mean, it didn't matter. UPS, USPS, FedEx, etc. And then we started figuring out, hey, it's a lot cheaper if we get an account with X carrier and ship everything through them because we're promising them lots of volume, right? And so we consolidating everything there. But then I guess to your question, Annik, on what should John consider, we noticed that some carriers are really bad at delivering to homes, whereas others are really good delivering to homes. But we also discovered that some are incredibly better in price delivering to companies, to business addresses, versus others that there's just not really that much of a break. So yeah, I mean, I guess those are things that you should consider. I mean, I just wanted to use that example. I mean, that's the best thing I can do. And I just wanted to say that because I know Andy has a ton of more information since he worked for the business. So
yeah. So how does that with the news updates? What kind of changes brings that, or what kind of problems are there that's coming to other businesses?
Here's the thing. There's a lot of times that people are looking. The reason they're using multiple carriers is that they may do spot pricing, if you want to call it that, where at the time, who's the cheapest one? I'm just going to go with them. And there's a lot of software programs out there that are like 3PL, 4PL. That's third-party logistics or four-party logistics, if you want to know what the 3PL type, what that means, is a third-party, fourth-party software that will take your information as you're preparing to do the pick and pack, prepare the shipment, And then they're sourcing it out to say, all right, where's it going and all that. And they're going to look at it and say, okay, this one's going the post office. This one's going FedEx or UPS or DHL or whomever else. There's also local, if you're in this is also in the last mile delivery where, you may be a distributor and you're importing a bunch of things and then you do the pick and pack and it sends it out. And so you could consolidate some things regionally and then have another carrier take it over. As they're looking at it, you're trying to do it off of price, and it's what it boils down to. Quite frankly, the things to answer your question, what should you be looking for? You're looking at, and I got to tell you, Lalo's experiences are his example, and his experience is perfect. Is where, if you can ship to one location, then, the shipment will be heavier. It'll be cheaper in the overall because you have one delivery. If you're having to break that up and send it to multiple, especially residential, you got to look at your service. Where are you shipping to? Literally the zip codes and the population out there and then the volume of shipments. If you're consolidating all that with one carrier, you're going to get a better discount. But keep in mind, it's like you got to look at that and see as far as delivery. Basically, in today's world, if you give a commitment to say, we'll have that to you in 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is, usually it's 2 or 3 days. That's what people have that expectations, number one. Number two is what is the information that can be supplied by the carrier that can be linked up to your own website so that your end customer can track their shipment. That way it takes you out of the middle and it gives it, that's a key service. That's something like, I'd like to know where it's at, when's it going to get here? Is it on schedule, whatever. The third thing is obviously when it's delivered. Case in point, like the Amazons and, FedExes and different ones now are taking pictures of the box on the front porch or wherever they left it. That kind of information comes into play. And finally, the price scenario. So you have to weigh out all of those deals of what is it, the service expectations, align the carrier's capability with what your expectations are to say, can you do the things I'm looking for? And go from there. And I will say, Fred Smith, who was the founder of FedEx, as it migrated through its evolution and all that, there was one of the key things that came up. FedEx was the first one to really implement the tracking of a shipment from pickup to delivery all the way through and make it available and on a massive scale. That said, what Fred mentioned way back is the reason we're investing in, millions of dollars in technology to do the tracking and tracing at the time and whatever it is, bells and whistles, information about the shipment a lot of times is more important than the shipment. So that they can, you need the product, but you need to know where it's at, when it's there, and all those kinds of things. So that's where I come back to, finish this out. Yeah, price is a big deal. If you consolidate your volumes with a specific carrier, then you will definitely get a bigger discount or cheaper rates. However, you're less flexible potentially in being able to utilize other things. Now, you can always use other carriers as long as you are, maintain a certain volume with whatever that is. But if you consolidate, you're going to be able to get a bigger discount. But, to the point, who are you shipping to, businesses or residential? And there is a definitive difference of some of these that can deliver to residential better than others. So that's some of the
Fun fact. Wait, actually I have a package here that I have to send, but I'm sending it to DHL. Anyways. Couldn't send it because they asked me for cash, and I was like, I don't have any
which
cash.
is part of the German Post.
Yeah, it is DHL. But they wanted cash, and it's so cheap to ship here. So like this package is, it's pretty going far, but it's in Germany. And it's like €4. But I that's what he told me. But I don't know if that includes like the tracking, because the tracking is super important for me. It's the more important than, actual package, I feel like, because you need to know where it goes and stuff. And what if it gets lost? Like, you want to have the protection on it, especially if it's something that you need to get there. Anyways, going to a little more serious topic. U.S. aims to impose tighter curbs on civilian gun export. So this is basically the proposed changes would involve the creation of distinct trade categories for semi-automatic firearms and increased involvement of the U.S. State Department in vetting export licenses. Yeah, there definitely is some question around that, right? So there's a scenario I have, and I'm going to tie it together with the article, because I guess sometimes we read these articles and we don't know how to implement it in our business. Not that everyone deals with firearms, but if you do, maybe that's how you can, or you can understand it better. So a manufacturer of semi-automatic firearms in the United States is seeking to export their products to a foreign country with high crime rate. The concern is that these firearms may end up in the hands of criminal organizations and contribute to further violence and instability. How can the proposed changes in export regulations ensure that the exported firearms are not diverted for illicit purposes? Basically, goes hand in hand with the article. So what is your guys' stance on that? Or what would be a solution?
Right. Well, I don't know about a solution. I'm not
no solution.
I'm not that.
There's not a solution here. Yeah.
Anyway, but it actually makes sense to allow the export of the guns, in my opinion. Okay, of course, because I'm looking at it as they're being exported for or to like a police force, or military, or people who are intended to be using this. So how they get to other people's, like criminals' hands, I mean, that it's the same thing here. How do criminals get their hands on, and there's a black market for it and everything. So I don't know what the solution is. Of course, I mean, there's the issue export licenses for those weapons, and I guess it's the same way. You just track it and make sure that someone, the resale of those arms is controlled as well. Just like if you were to do a re-export or a sale of something that was exported, and the end use or the end customer is also your responsibility. So, I mean, yeah, that's about as much as I can say or think about, about this topic.
Well, on the scenario here too, though, that what the Biden administration is wanting to focus on is the export of weapons that are going to civilians, and more specifically, or being exported by civilians as well. Even though the manufacturer wanting to ship them out, if they're shipping to, and this is where the restriction comes into play, is if they're going to individuals, they want to, look at that and scrutinize it and either permit it. The question I have in this, though, that in this particular article, and this article was published by Reuters through the U.S. News and World Report. And in this is that what I don't see is the government is extremely vague, the U.S. government in this case. They had restricted the export of the weapons and ammunition for 90 days until they could take a look at it. And now they're coming back with what they're wanting to do is restrict it now and on a ongoing basis. Let's put it in perspective, though, is that when I say they're vague, first off, there's no report of the breakdown to say, well, here are the countries where we have noticed U.S. weapons getting into the hands of criminals. There's none of that. It's just speculation at this point. Secondly, though, I will say that there had been some reports of weapons from the U.S. going out from a civilian perspective that were going to some of the Muslim countries, that then people were using those in the situation with Hezbollah and Hamas and different ones that were utilizing it for, terrorist activities and things of that nature. Then you've got the war going on between Israel and in the Gaza Strip there. And so there's that. So I understand I'm kind of mixed on this. I don't have sufficient information when I'm trying to look at this to make a decision, say, yeah, we should or shouldn't. There's not a cookie cutter solution here. This needs to be looked at on a destination-based scenario there to say yes or no as far as this kind of stuff goes. I will say this to our listeners: if there is anybody out there that would like to go into more details about the transportation of weapons and ammunition, going out there on a global basis as you're shipping it around, whatever, and would like to come on and talk about it, we'd love to, talk to you about it, because it would be one of those to, it's, well, what do you do? What about a hunting trip? There's a lot of people that's what they're claiming with what you call a long gun is a rifle. You're going to go to some location for hunting, and you want to take your own weapon and all of that, and hence the ammunition as well. On the same token, you've got the semi-automatic. You also have the pistols, if you will, and our handguns. And so they could be used in a nefarious way. Personally, I just look at it also in some of these countries. There are people that are probably looking at trying to defend themselves. And, where there's a lot of crime rate, it's like, well, what's going on? Well, if the government's not doing something about it, the individuals have to try and protect themselves. So again, this is one of those where, there's not a cookie cutter scenario here. It needs to be assessed by destination country. And then, unfortunately, in this particular article, it really doesn't give enough detail for us to really make further comment here.
Also, we import a lot of guns now that I'm kind of researching about that. And it's actually went up to 1 billion. Going on to another very controversial topic. Just kidding. Well, it's going into politics, but I think trade, there's so much politics in trade, right? So this one is Trump's proposed 10% tariff plan would shake up every asset class, strategist says. So ultimately, what they were saying is that people kind of are concerned, and they're debating, those are economists, strategists, and investors. They're saying that it is expected to triple government revenues. Yay, that's right. That's all we care about. But let's look at what it would decrease. So, who it would harm in that sense. So the consequences would be increased costs for consumers, which we talk about a lot, and we say that's something we don't like, right? So how can we find a medium? And retaliatory tax increases on U.S. exports and a negative impact on the U.S. GDP. Anyways, this is all speculation. So we're not saying this is happening or this is the outcome. Obviously, they're just saying this is a potential impact.
Yeah, well, all right. First off, it's a proposal. So the one thing as far as generally regarding Trump is if you look at his book, you look at his history, you look at all this, he always starts at an extreme position, and then he's willing to negotiate. That's his deal. He works on this. So, I will say this particular article is published by CNBC. That is not a conservative deal. So Elliott Smith is the author in this. And CNBC, they are as far left as you can get in this. Now, raising the issue, I think it's fine, is that they're taking the extreme in this and then they're projecting it out. Well, okay, so if you go in and put a 10%, I personally do not support a flat across the board 10% and all that. However, what I don't have thus far, and I would like to know more details on Trump's proposal, is what is his objective? What is he trying to do? Generally, I would say he is a big proponent, based on past histories, of trying to reinvigorate the manufacturing industries in the U.S. And he was promoting that because there were, even automakers were looking at and announcing, we're putting a new factory down in Mexico or here or that country or whatever. And he was like, well, why are you not doing it here in the U.S.? And so there's those kinds of things. I agree that there would be retaliatory measures taken from other countries. Here's the thing that I think, as far as this goes, though, is Trump is trying to create an incentive for people to come to the table and to negotiate some kind of a trade deal. And in that, it's like, look, we're going to slap 10%. Yeah, they want to slap something on ours. Okay, fine. But they need us more than we need them, kind of a deal. Everybody wants access to the U.S. market, But when it comes to U.S. goods, and I've said this time and time, I don't care who's in the White House. I've seen this over and over and over again. U.S. goods are not treated fairly. People all over the world want full access to the U.S. Why? Because we are the number one economy in the world. It's a massive economy. And if you look at the volume of exports in the U.S., compared to imports, it's a small percentage of our GDP. And compared to other countries, I think our exports are only like 3% of our GDP. The average, last time I did an analysis on it, was 8.7%. Well, my goodness, that's the scenario where Trump is wanting to see manufacturing regenerated in the U.S. And I think this is just a tactic in that. So in looking at it and looking at the article and again, all that, it sounds, crazy. It sounds a little bit scary. At the same time, it's one of those that the tactic would be with Trump is he starts from based on what I've seen in the past, he starts from an extreme position and then he's willing to negotiate.
And my point of view, the thing that concerns me the most, and I've always supported, and I've always felt that free trade agreements are really good for not only our economy, but our partner countries' economies. I can tell you right now, I mean, if there's a 10%, it doesn't say in the article. I was reading and reading. That's why I didn't want to go first, because I was reading some more on it. I can't find any indication on what they're talking about. If Trump, and I guess I need to research more. I did a poor job of preparing, but I'm just wondering, does this also include the free trade agreements? To me, it sounds like it does. It's just universal, 10%. So what are the other impacts of that? Of course, if we do 10%, a lot of products that come in and out of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada because of USMCA, for example. I mean, there's a bunch of other free trade agreements, U.S. Korea, U.S. Australia. I mean, there's just a bunch of them, but I'm just going with USMCA. That's the largest one right now. So what is the impact? Of course, now 10%, a lot less imports, a lot less exports. I mean, who knows, how that. But the way I see it, I mean, living here in the border and I'm going way back and I'm going to, just like date myself here. But back in the day when NAFTA was first going to get introduced, Ross Perot, who was a conservative, but ran under all
of the things said about that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Ross Perot was a conservative, but he didn't get the nomination. So he ran as a reformist, I think. It doesn't matter. I mean, the what party he ran under, it doesn't matter. There was actually for the first time a viable 3-party presidential election at that time. And his deal was, we're going to hear the big sucking sound of jobs and opportunities, et cetera, that it was very grim, the outlook, according to him, on NAFTA being approved back in the day, back in 1994. So it was not good, of course, Of course, we know now what happened. And yeah, there's jobs that are lost. But honestly speaking, here on the border, the way we see it, or the way I see it, not we, I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, we have a lot more jobs. There's so many supporting jobs, I guess, let's call it, that are created because of what is going on in Mexico. And, that support the efforts in Mexico, the manufacturing efforts in Mexico because of USMCA. But so my thing is, we get rid of that and all those jobs, or a lot of those jobs, they'll go away. They'll come back to the United States. But then we're going to be complaining, and I'm going to refrain from saying bad words, but we're going to be complaining that now all these immigrants are coming in illegally because they don't have work in Mexico. I mean, I'm telling you right now, those plants and those manufacturing operations in Mexico, I've been in there. I spent 20 years doing my work there in Mexico and going to those plants and they thrive. They have communities. They build homes around there and everything. I don't feel like that would be possible if there was not a free trade agreement, because there would not be that much volume going back and forth. And all those people that are coming into the U.S. would more than double now because they're looking for opportunities now in the United States. So that's just my opinion. I'm looking at it above and beyond what, what the 10% will do. So, I mean, anyway.
Well, we're still far from it. We're still far from it, from all that. And let's hope never that, actually. Anyways, that kind of wraps up the entire thing, basically. So, any other comments, suggestions in that sense? Well, this was what we just were talking about. It has not happened, and it might not happen, and hopefully won't. Or whatever anyone's opinion on that is.
Look at it from a different angle. It's like when Trump was in office, one of the things he was doing, and it was controversial, is he wanted to renegotiate the NAFTA agreement. So we had NAFTA that came in that's been mentioned. And so he wanted to look at, renegotiating that with both Mexico and Canada. Well, Canada flat out said, no way. And, actually Canada benefited a lot from NAFTA. But Mexico was probably, in my opinion, the biggest benefactor of that. All that to say, Trump was like, okay, fine. And so then it went through, and Mexico was very adamant about trying to come up with an agreement. So they basically came up with a bilateral agreement. And the next thing you know, Canada goes, oh, no, wait a minute. We want in on this now, where they said no before. Then all of a sudden they wanted, and we had the U.S.-Canadian Mexico-Canadian agreement, or NAFTA 2.0. And it actually was a very good agreement for all three countries, and especially from a standpoint of labor rates. It was a little bit more fair, and the timeline to resolve dispute agreements on trade was shortened up, and it really has benefited a lot. Mexico has really benefited a lot. But all said and done, I just see this as, again, the proposed right now is a 10% across the board from Trump, or if he's reelected. I think that's just a starting point, and it will be a case where a lot of people will be negotiating. So that's my opinion.
Since it's International Customs Day for us today, not for you, because as the listener, you are listening to it on Monday, and it is currently Friday. I have an interesting fact, which is not international, but it's US based. It's kind of international, though, because it's about London. So did you know that the US Customs Declaration made London Bridge the world's largest antique ever sold? Did you know?
U.S. Customs or is it
U.S. Customs?
UK Customs?
No, U.S.
U.S.
Yeah.
Why was it?
So it says that the London Bridge wasn't exactly falling down in the 1960s, but it was sinking under the weight of modern traffic. When the capital city in England decided to build another to replace it, the 1831 bridge was put up for sale. The winning bid came from Robert P. McCulloch, American entrepreneur and chairman of McCulloch Oil Company. So that's where it went. And then...
Yes, and it was... And they moved it.
It's a long story. Yeah, they moved it. So that... They did. Because it was basically sinking. Anyways, so that's kind of a fun fact about that, and a great way to end. We hope that you have a great, wonderful, successful, happy week. And yeah, we'll see you next Monday. Also, just wanted to share that before we record this episode, you can check out the articles that we use on the Global Training Center LinkedIn newsletter, because I always share the newsletter on Friday in the mornings for you. So you can read it beforehand, kind of get familiar with the articles. And then on Monday, we're going to discuss them deeper, get in arguments, do whatever we need to do to bring the point across. Anyway, so thank you for listening. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or You can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.